Welcome to this tutorial on the random library in Python. Today we're going to be looking at the random library and introduce 4 new methods that will help create random values in almost any situation. These 4 methods are random.random, random.uniform, random.randrange, and random.choice. First, let's take a look at random.random. This method takes no parameters, meaning you cannot alter the function of this method. It will always give back the same values of random numbers. This method returns a random floating point number in the range of 0.0 to 1.0. This means that the value will not be a whole number such as 0 or 1, but rather one with a decimal place. This means that for a random number n is greater than or equal to 0.0 and less than 1.0. This means that the value can never be 1.0 since it is not less than or equals to 1.0. Next, let's take a look at random.uniform. This method takes 2 parameters, an integer start and an integer stop. When we use 2 parameters, this method returns a random floating point number in the range of start to stop inclusively. This means that for any random number n is greater than or equal to start and is less than or equal to stop. Unlike our previous one of random.random, our higher number will be included as a possible random number. Next, we have random.randrange. This method can take up to 3 parameters. When using 1 parameter, the method uses an integer stop as its parameter. This returns a random integer from 0 to stop. When it uses 2 parameters, the method uses an integer start and an integer stop. This returns a random integer from start to stop. If we use 3 parameters, we get start, stop, and step, all integers. This method will return a random integer from start to stop with an increment of step, meaning if the step is greater than 1, it will skip step minus 1 integers in the range between numbers just like it did in our for loops. This means that for any random number n is greater than or equal to start and is less than stop. So this means that it excludes our higher number. Finally, let's take a look at random.choice. The method takes 1 parameter, which is a sequence. Sequences can come in many different types, such as strings, ranges, or lists, just to name a few. This method returns a random value from our sequence. This means that it returns a value at a random integer n, where n is greater than or equal to 0 and is less than the length of the sequence. And it will return any value that is at that index. Okay, let's look at the coding aspect of random numbers in Python. So the first thing you need to do in order to do this is you need to import random. If you do not choose to import random, anything you try to run with random will not work. This also needs to be the first line in the code before any other random calls. The only other thing that can come before it would be other imports. So let's just remind ourselves, random.random creates a random float from 0 to 1. This means that num is equal to random.random will assign that random value to our variable num. If I output our variable, you'll notice that when I go to run, I will get a random value from 0 to 1. If I try running this again, I will get a different value. Random.uniform creates a random float from start to stop, so unlike random.random, it does not end at 1. If I use 1, 10, this will include 1 but exclude 10 and be impossible to get. If I try running this, I get a number from 1 to 9.99999. If I try running this again, I should get a different number. Next up was random.randrange. This was a start to stop but gave us a random integer instead. If I use 1, 11, reminding ourselves that we exclude the last number, this will give us a random integer from 1 to 10. When I run this, I should get a random integer each time. Turns out I'm just getting 2 a lot, but it is indeed random. Next up is implementing the step. If I use 0 as my base and 2 as my step, I should get only even numbers. If I change my starting number to 1, I will instead get odd numbers. Now let's look at excluding numbers from our ranges. In order to do this, we need to use a random range that's going to go from 1 to 10, and we want to exclude 5. In order to do this, we're going to use a while loop that says as long as num is equal to 5, we're going to go and replace that value with a new random value. This means that when we go to output afterwards, we should end up with a random number that is not 5. And no matter how many times I run this, I will not get 5. 5. 5. Last but not least, we have random choice. This gets a random value from a sequence. For instance, the sequence that we are going to use is a string that goes from A to H. This means that I will get a random character from this sequence and assign it to the variable char. If I output char, if I output char, this means that I should get a random. If I output char, then I should get a random character from my sequence, such as H, B, and B again. Please keep in mind that this will return a random character. It can be used on other iterables, such as ranges, as well as lists. Anything that is a sequence can be used on random.random. choice.